Now, when it comes to upgrading the interior of your car or truck, most people think of the basics. Shift knobs, shift boots, Betty Boop floor mats, or even a dash overlay kit. But what about your gauges? Well, the factory gauges in most vehicles are accurate enough for daily use, but they're not much to look at. Sprucing up your stock gauges is something the average enthusiast can do, and the results can be dramatic. So what are the benefits of an aftermarket gauge face anyway? Well, it's all about customization. Swapping out your factory gauge face with an aftermarket is certainly a way to set your vehicle apart. Not to mention the fact that some people don't like the way the factory gauge cluster looks anyway. This is a great way to change things up. Most of the time, it's easier to install a gauge face kit than it looks. It does require some patience and a light hand, though, to get it done correctly. Now, there are several different types of gauge face kits. You've got Indiglo kits, you have kits that are stainless steel, even kits with flames. Some of the kits even come with custom needles for a truly custom look. Now, since actions speak louder than words, we're going to install an EL Glow gauge face kit in our Project Integra. Now, NR Automotive makes this. They also make a variety of colors and styles. Now, let's see what we're up against. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and remove our steering wheel. Now, we have our NRG quick release on here. This is going to make things a little bit easier. And once we do that, we're going to go ahead and remove our trim pieces around our steering wheel, and then our dash will come right out. Now we've got two screws up here to pull our cluster. Okay, now in order to pull our cluster, there are two screws on either side. We're going to go ahead and remove those, and then the cluster will come right in our hands. Now there are going to be wires connected to the back of this along with possibly a speedometer cable. Some speedometers are electric and some are mechanical. The mechanical ones will have usually a little clip that you have to pull out, and in order for the cable to come out, you want to make sure you don't break that clip. All right, now we've got our gauge cluster out. We're going to install our NR Automotive gauge faces in our Integra kit. Now, this is what it looks like. Now, this particular kit that we have is for a manual transmission, and it's going to come with this gauge face here. If you have an automatic transmission, it has a spot right here for the indicator light too. So make sure you order the proper one for your vehicle. Now, to get started, take the gauge cluster apart. Remember, we always look for the hidden screws. You don't ever force anything. And in our particular instance, on the back of our Integra gauge cluster, it has 3 screws in here that actually hold the back together. We're going to start out by taking those out first. Okay, now once we have those out, now on the back there are these tabs that actually hold the front of the cluster on. We're going to go ahead and remove these. Now this is going to be kind of cumbersome because there are a bunch of them, and I only have 2 hands, obviously. So what you're going to do is you're going to use a little dynamic tension. You can use a flat blade screwdriver, which is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to break some of them loose just a little bit. Now, not a lot of tension, guys, just a little bit, just enough to keep it separated to where you've got a little bit of tension against it, so when you pop the next one, it just clips right out of place. Then you can move the screwdriver over a little bit and go to the next one. Now we got the bottom loose. Now we'll move on to the top and do the exact same thing. All right, now we're going to go ahead and install our gauge faces. Now, these from NR Automotive have holes large enough to where they'll actually fit over top the needle without actually taking the needles off. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our adhesive strips, and we're going to go ahead and put those on the back of our gauge face so that that's prepared and ready to go. Okay, then you're going to be real careful not to make sure that the sticky doesn't touch the gauge until you get it where you want it. You're going to slip it over top of the needle and put it in place. Now I'm using the center as a reference. And then just going to stick it right over the top. And there's our first one right there. We're going to pull our needle around and just kind of bend our gauge face a little bit here. Now, when you're doing this, what you want to do is you want to make sure you index your speeds. For example, on our original gauge, it's exactly the same. The numbers are in the same spot. That way, the speedometer and the tachometer, everything stays accurate. So what I did is I actually lined up the 80 mile per hour line exactly with the 80 mile per hour line underneath it. That way, everything is going to be symmetrical. It's going to be exactly the way it's supposed to be. Okay, now we've got our gauge faces on. Now we're going to get set up to put our housing back together. Now these are designed to be ultra thin so that it just slides over the top. Sometimes you have to trim just a little bit around your fascia just so that it doesn't bind up against these, but these are designed to go just right through the factory clips. They will. All right, now what we're going to do, now that we've got our gauge cluster back together, we're going to take really good care not to bend these wires out too much as you're putting them around, because they can break very easily. Now we're going to go ahead and hook up our rheostat, and this right here controls the color of the gauges. They can either be blue or green. And what we're going to do is, it's real simple. It's just a hot and a ground. And what we did is we got an additional fuse connector. This is going to be like a piggyback. So what we're going to do is we're going to hook our hot wire here. You're going to pull the factory fuse out. This is going to go right in the fuse block, and then we're going to put an additional fuse in here to wire up this particular wire. So we're not going to have to add any fuses or anything like that. This is going to take care of that. Okay, now before we install our gauge cluster back in the car, remember the factory gauges use light that comes from the back, and that's how it illuminates the factory gauges. We're going to take those lights out since these operate a little differently and have their own power source. That are these big bulbs right here. These are the ones that actually light the gauge faces. Now, there are other things in here, our ABS light, our fuel light, our hatch light. All those also have light bulbs. You want to leave those in because those are your warning lights. So you want to make sure that those are in and operating properly. So now that we've got all that done, we're going to go ahead and install this in our Integra. All right, now I've run my wiring harness from our little rheostat that changes colors up through the back of the dash. Now we're going to go ahead and connect our EL Glow wires to our dash. Now these should only connect one way, and they will. So you just connect all these up. All right, now once that's done, you want to take real good care to tuck the wires in there very well so they're not rubbing up against anything. Again, they're very thin, so you don't want to tear up the wires. All right, now remember when you're adding a circuit, anytime you're adding a circuit to your fuse box, basically what we're doing is we're splitting a circuit, because even though we're adding a fuse, it still goes into one socket. Those are only designed to take so much current. So you want to pick something that has a relatively low draw already. Now in our particular case, our EL Glow gauges don't take up hardly any energy anyway, so we're going to use a 5 amp fuse, and then of course the top one is our new ADA fuse. So we're going to take the other fuse that we take out of our fuse box. It's going to go on this bottom one, and it's going to still continue to run that particular circuit. We're just going to tie into that circuit to pull our extra amperage for our lights. Keep in mind that not all white face gauges, like our EL Glow gauges in our Project Integra, use their own power source. A lot of them will use the factory gauge lights that came in your vehicle. Our installation took about 30 minutes with ordinary hand tools that you can buy right here at andysautosport.com. Popular brands we carry are New Image, Alpha Auto, US Speedo, and of course, NR Automotive. If you have any questions, feel free to call one of our knowledgeable sales staff at 1-800-419-1152 or email us at info@andysautosport.com. And once you get your car completely modified, make sure you send us pictures to customer.rides@andysautosport.com. We may feature your car on our website. We hope you've learned something today, and we'll see you on another episode of Andy's Autosport TV.